Welcome to You Make the Difference. I'm Wanda Walker, and today I'm interviewing Frida Hart. Frida is on the planning committee for Teen Maze, and she's taken a lead role this year. We're going to hear all about Teen Maze. Welcome to the show, Frida.
Thank you. Very nice to be here.
Now tell me, what is Teen Maze?
Teen Maze is a concept that was created to try to help show teenagers, particularly young students, what the awareness factors they need to have in order to make good judgment decisions, and what the risks are when they make bad behavioral decisions at those young early ages.
Yes, and it's a powerful interactive process that they enter into, isn't it?
Yes, very much so.
It's for ninth grade students.
Correct.
And so all the ninth grade students who have parental consent will come through the Teen Maze this year. Tell me when it's going to be.
The dates are November 3rd through the 7th, and that's a full week where November 3rd is where we're setting all of the maze units up, which is quite a task. And then on November the 4th, we have a preview night, so we encourage all parents of the ninth graders, as well as other parents, if they express an interest in coming, to come, and we actually send those parents through the maze just like we do the students when they come. And their days are the 5th and the 6th, and that's what we do all day long, is we have bus loads of ninth graders come, and we start them on one journey, and we're not sure they're the same when they finish that journey. And then the last day of the 7th, if we have a small group that needs to come, we sometimes can work out that morning for them, and then if not, then that's the breakdown.
Yes, and so parent night, I remember hearing a story about a parent who came through on parent night, and she had not graduated from high school, and she was able to graduate and go across the stage, and it was just a real impactful moment for the parent.
Well, and for us as well. You know, watching her, because we do the entire graduation ceremony. You know, we have the pomp and circumstance, we have the noisemakers, we put them in a row, we put a cap on them, and then they walk across the stage, and we have a principal of one of the schools actually handing them their diploma. And then when their name is called out on the loudspeaker, you know, there's lots of hoorah and yays, and this lady went into tears. So of course all the rest of us watching her, we all went into tears.
Yes.
But it was a very powerful and emotional thing for this adult whose child was going to be coming through it, to be able to experience, you know, that step of life that we hope all of our teenagers get to do.
Yes, and so the goal of Teen Maze is to graduate from high school.
Correct.
But there are many obstacles placed in the way of the teenagers that are going through. And the obstacles are designed to replicate some of the things that they will face during their high school year.
Right.
And they'll have to make choices and decisions about those. And it gives them an opportunity to see, if they make this decision, what will happen. And so that's got to be helpful when they get into real life, and that situation is put before them, that they've already seen what can happen if they make that choice.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about when they first get there. When they get off the bus, what's the first scene that they will go into?
Well, they'll walk in the door, and the first thing we do is give them a colored wristband. And the wristband has significance as to what they're going to do later in the maze. It's funny, after you have a couple of groups to come through, they start calling and texting their buddies and saying, try to get this band, try to get that band, but we change it up so they never know what color band is going to replicate what. But they go into what we call the party scene. And in the party scene, we have placed all of these different obstacles, such as alcohol and various drugs, and we have the bowl of party pills, and there's you know, all the hoopla and the chaos that go along with a teenage party.
Yes.
And then we also provide information, there are brochures and paraphernalia there at the end that explain to them, okay, if they took a handful of these pills out of this, you know, what potentially could happen. And the party scene gets them really riled up and ready for who knows what's going to come next.
Right.
And then we go on after we get them all stirred up and loud and excited.
Let's talk about what happens in the party scene with teen violence.
We actually portray scenarios where someone, whether it's a boy or girl, because
Yes.
violence is not always male on female.
Right.
But we portray a situation, and we have actors, if you want to call them that do something in a violent manner with one of the actor students, and
Yes.
and the students there get to see what leads up to it, what occurs during it, and then what results may come out of it. And as we know, teen violence is a problem that every county faces. We're certainly not immune to it, but it's scary.
Yes.
Even going through the maze myself, even setting it up and knowing what actors are doing, just like the lady that graduated, it was a very eye-opening experience to me 4 years ago when we first did it.
Yes, and Harmony House works on the script
Correct.
and makes sure that it's good and realistic, and
Right.
we have lots of county agencies participating in Teen Maze. But let's move to the next scene.
Okay.
What happens after they go through the party scene?
Well, after the party scene, of course, they've been introduced to the alcohol and the other drugs.
Yes.
And we take them outside. And the local law enforcement have been super in helping set up an actual drunk driving course. And they're taking, we also have an accident scene as well.
Yes.
Let me address the accident scene
Okay.
first. We have a wreck that truly has been in a wreck, and it's just demolished, brought out, and then we have an actor portrayal of a teen that was in that vehicle that had the accident, and they're on the concrete, sheets covering them, and
Yes.
it's not a very pleasant scene. We have an actor parent who is usually the mom, and we bring the mom on the scene, and here she finds her teenage daughter or son and on the ground, and the person's covered in a sheet, which usually means that they lost their life.
Right.
And the mother really goes into, as best as she possibly can, how a parent would react to walk up on the scene and find their child has died.
Yes.
And it's very intense.
It is.
We've had really good people play those roles, but in the law enforcement help us make sure that, again, like in the party scene, this is realistic. It's what they walk up on when they're called to the scene, of an accident, especially where someone's been killed.
Yes. Okay, and then some of the students get to do the drunk driving scene. Let's talk
Right.
about that.
And while that scene is very serious,
Very fresh in their minds
yes,
too.
because they've just, again, once they've been introduced to all the drug situations, plus they've been introduced to the horrible wreck, and then now we have the drunk driving scene. And again, law enforcement has been wonderful in helping us set up an actual drunk driving scenario where they have the goggles that are used in their training events in the actual law enforcement academies. And the students that are going to go through the drunk driving course, and of course they love to do this,
Yes.
but they put on these goggles and they get in a cart, and then the law enforcement has drawn out a path for this cart to go. And of course the goal is to stay between the orange cones and not to run over some of the significant stations that are posted throughout this little trail. That's rarely the case that you don't hit something.
Yes.
The teens have no idea what they're going to experience until they put those goggles on, and then the law enforcement officer gets in the cart with them and tells them to press the gas. Of course, these are just golf carts, so they're
Yes.
not going very fast. But the teens that are watching them, are laughing and carrying on. But you can every few students, you can pick out the face of one that thinks, that could happen to me,
Yes.
or if the goggles, they can look through the goggles whether they get to go through the cart, ride in the cart or not. And I myself did that one in our first year, and I put on the goggles, and you had to take a couple of steps to the cart, and I couldn't walk. I was so drunk and dizzy that they had to take the goggles off of me and wait till I got in the cart and then put the goggles on me. I ran down everything. I ran over all the cones. I ran over all of the significant, indicators they had, the mom in the carriage, the fire hydrant, and in the end, the officer was laughing. He said, "You just ran down the officer that stopped you."
Oh, wow.
It was such an intense look that I don't know how in the world anybody would think that after being under the influence of even a small amount of alcohol, that they could get behind the wheel. And it's bad enough for a person 21 or older to think they can do it, but for a teenager to ingest something like that and then get behind the wheel, I mean, they're begging for an accident to happen.
Yes.
And it's very eye-opening is probably a good way to say it, to the fact that you can't see, and to be able to judge your distance or judge someone walking in front of you, or even a stop sign or a red light. It was impossible for me to do.
Yes.
The ones that get to go through that, I don't think that they ever forget the fact that they could not see.
Right.
And Georgia's legal limit is 0.08, and that's for an adult. So if you take a teenager, which usually they're a little bit smaller in stature and weight, a 0.08 is probably 10% more effective in making them unable to do that, unable to drive.
Okay, so when they knock down those cones, they get arrested, and what happens to them
Yes.
then? They go before the judge, is that right?
Yes, they are actually handcuffed,
Oh, wow.
and with real handcuffs.
Yes.
And escorted by the police officers into the next section, which is the legal system. And we have a couple of judges that graciously provide us with their time, and they're tough. It scares us just to hear them playing this scenario out. But the child is brought before the judge, and depending on some of the ramifications or what the event led up to, it determines what the judge's sentence is. However, being a teenager, they're even tougher because one, they've done it underage.
That's right.
So they've broken that law, and then two, whatever the result was in them being arrested, it just contributes to the punishment. And I think that in counties and possibly the state, there's even the thing now where they'll lose their license
Yes.
till maybe 18 or older. And when you're standing there and you watch the faces of these kids that are in handcuffs with a police officer standing next to them, and this judge bearing down in their face, and then they lose their license.
And they go to jail, don't they?
Yes, they can go to jail, and they can spend time actually in a jail cell with grown criminals that have broken the law.
Yeah, but in the teen maze, they actually go to jail, isn't that
Yes,
right?
we have a mock jail set up over there.
Yes.
So if the judge, sends them directly to jail, then the policeman escorts them in handcuffs to the actual jail cell and puts them in the jail cell, and there they sit for a while.
Yes, and so in the maze, it's according to the script that they
Yes.
receive, what they'll experience. But some of them are hurt in those accidents, and they
Yes.
go to the emergency room. Tell me about that.
Yes, we have a mock ER set up
Yes.
in one of our units, and in the accident, the child is hurt, and they're brought by the medical personnel into the ER, and it's gory and it's bloody, and the ER people have them on a gurney, and they're working with them, and we try to depict an actual emergency room scene.
Yes.
So you've got the wires and the tubes and the bottles and the scissors and the knives, and then we have medical personnel that are actually real medical people that portray the doctors and the nurses in there. And sometimes the students are patched up, and then sometimes they don't make it through. But we're thankful again. We have community support from West Georgia Medical Center, and they actually send real medical personnel.
Yes.
LaGrange College sends their nursing students there. So not only are we teaching our students coming through the maze, but the nursing students that may be in this ER one day are seeing what it's like to actually treat a teenager that's been hurt
Yes.
in an accident.
So they're getting some experience too.
Right.
Now, when they get hurt and they die in the maze, they're sent to the funeral home, right?
Correct.
And I know I work in the funeral home scene, so I'll tell you what happens in the funeral home scene. They come in and we give them a sheet of paper for them to fill out.
Mm-hmm.
That sheet of paper, we say, this is going to be put in the newspaper. We'll use this information to put it in the newspaper so your friends will know that you've died. And we also use that sheet of paper for the pastor who will give their eulogy.
Mm-hmm.
So they're coming into the funeral home. They see other people, other students who have lost their life in the maze, waiting to hear their funeral. The eulogy, because they've given us their information, is really tailored to them. And so, we say who their parents are, how many brothers and sisters they have, maybe what some of their goals in life were, and that we're so sorry that this life was cut short. And then we do a moment just to remember their life and say, they put on there how they would like to be remembered. So we say, please join us in remembering Sally Smith, who wanted to be remembered for her desire to be a doctor, or whatever it is. And working in that funeral home scene, I really saw that ninth graders sometimes have high aspirations. I mean, they want to be doctors, they want to be nurses, they want to be pilots, those kinds of things. And so they have a goal in life, and to hear that goal has been cut short, or they're not going to be able to reach that goal, I think has an impact on them.
And it's because they made a bad decision.
Right.
It's not a given that was going to happen to them. They were put into a situation where undoubtedly they made the wrong choice, whether it was alcohol or pills, getting behind the wheel, or being involved in a vehicle where their friend was the one behind the wheel. And it could have been avoided.
Yes.
In many, many aspects of it.
Yes. And then sometimes if we have enough time in the maze, we'll say, now in real life you don't get another chance, but in Teen Maze sometimes you do. And so we'll send them to another station, which is the dating station.
Right.
Tell us what happens with the dating station.
There are various scenarios with the dating station. And you mentioned earlier about the script. We have little scripts, little pieces of paper that we cut up and we put in these bowls. So when they come back into the center from the accident outside and as well as the wreck, unless they've gone directly to the judge or they've gone directly after they lost their life and they ended up in the funeral home, they pick a scene, they pick a tab, and it sends them to date 1 or date 2 or date 3. And each one of these dates are geared a little bit differently. One, may be a date where it's just a normal date and they go out on a date and they have a little bit of peer pressure, potentially, for sex to be involved, but they say no. And those are the lucky ones, and we'll come back to there because that goes into the graduation part. Date 2 may be that they gave in to peer pressure, and because they gave in to peer pressure, they became pregnant. And it's very difficult for a grown person to deal with pregnancy, even when they're wanting to do it. But you take a teenager that is now going to become a parent, and we don't just again do the females.
Yes.
The young man may have picked the slip that said you go on a date and you become pregnant. we send either one of them to the station where they get a belly pack.
Right.
So they have to carry around this belly pack that represents being pregnant to the rest of their stations. And they realize, carrying that belly pack is not near as easy as it may look like it is.
It's heavy, isn't it?
Very heavy.
Yes.
And having children yourself, and when you have that belly packed on, it pulls on you in many areas. But you see these youngsters with these huge belly packs on, walking around all leaned over and trying to hold it, and you can't help but think, that could be you.
Mm-hmm.
But and again, they pick a scenario then of what happens with the child if they're going to keep the child and they have a support system in place, or they choose to give the child up for adoption. And in both of those situations, we send them to a unit where if they're keeping the child, are you going to be prepared physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially?
Yes.
And we give them all of this information about, okay, you got to have diapers, you got to have formula, you got to have wipes, you got to take them to the doctor. If you can't drive, don't drive, or don't have means, how are you going to get them to the doctor? And it's things that they never think about at that moment of peer pressure time,
right.
what that could result in. One of the other dating scenarios is they end up with some kind of venereal disease.
Yes.
And so they go to another section that's related to health. And this whole STD section is set up to show the various stages of what could happen if you've gotten one of the sexually transmitted diseases. It is very graphic.
Uh-huh.
There are some pictures and demonstrations that we actually put behind a screen, so it's just not out in the open, because it was more graphic than I was prepared to see the first time I went through. But it's reality, and unfortunately it's what some of our teens face, because again, being young and inexperienced, they don't know what they're looking for. They don't know what to watch for. And then when they realize that maybe something is wrong, it's gotten so far, and then they may be afraid to tell their parents.
Yes.
So many of them go to their peers, to other students, for help.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the specific goals of Teen Maze is to give them accurate reality information, and not what the teen sitting next to you may think happens because they saw it in a movie.
Yes.
And there are cases where STDs can cause you to die. They can disfigure you, disform you. They can take various degrees of your health away, just depending on what you contract and how far along it gets.
Yes. And also, I wanted to just touch a little bit on the baby's development. I know there is a booth set up that shows like the development of the baby from a very early age all the way up to maturity. And so they're able to talk to the nursing staff about the development of the baby. And I also know that some of them end up dealing with a crying baby in the maze, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you begin to feel the weight of the consequences for the actions that have been taken. Right. And headed to graduation, and then now you have a baby, and now you need to go to the bank and get some money, and now you need to go to DFACS and find out what you can get for your baby, and gosh, you got to tell your parents, and all those different kinds of things that go into what you have to do. That's when right. That happens. And so I think it's so important that they do get to have this eye-opening experience. Now, are those basically all the scenes that are in the Teen Maze?
Let's see. We've covered the funeral, the accident, the emergency room, the drunk driving, the different dating, the development of the fetus as it grows, the consequences of the emotional, physical, financial part. Over in the family and children section, you may be looking to see if there's possible assistance to help you with this newborn baby. And then you've got the adoption part that you may go through, which will be a very emotional thing because
Yes.
you're actually giving your child to someone else, and that child will then belong to those people. It won't be your child again. And then we offer the comment that, okay, in 20 years from now, you may be walking down the street and you may see a young man or a young lady, and you might wonder, is that my son or daughter?
Yes.
And then, of course, we have people from banks that are here that talk to them about how to take out loans, and the fact that they really have no way of paying them back. So financially, they're at a dead end. And then, but hopefully, in the good part of it, they've made the good choices, or even if they've made some very risky choices and they ended up with a child
Yes.
or with an STD, they've gotten help, they've gotten assistance. They have a support system that helps them get through school, and we
Right.
get to the graduation scene.
Yes, and the
Yes.
graduation scene is a wonderful scene, and even the pictures are taken of the graduation scene so that they can have those to remember. I want to just, in the last few minutes, talk about the students' reactions. What have you seen as you've done this?
Well, I've been at the front door when they've gotten off the bus, and some teenagers think that they're just immune to anything, and they're kind of pompous and loud, and all about funs and jokes. And then you've got those that are walking in that are very quiet because they have no idea what to expect.
Yes.
And it is a transformation, because some of those students that you see that are coming off that think that they have the world in their hand, they're the quiet ones at the very end. And we see a transformation probably in over half of the students.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like that in the other half, there's been one, it's just not displayed.
Yes.
Because many of them have no idea what consequences could come because of just a very small 5-minute decision that they should have made differently.
Yes.
And we have, through LaGrange College, we have these surveys that we do after the maze. The school system distributes them, and then the college compiles the data, and we get comments from one spectrum to the other about, we have some that might say, I didn't learn anything, which I'm not sure that that's going to be true, and
Yes.
all the way to, just shock and awe that they had no idea that drinking a beer could result in their death, or grabbing a handful of colorful candy-looking things out of a bowl could result in their death, or actually someone else's death. If they had an accident and they hurt someone else, and
Yes.
and the ramifications of that.
That's right, and I've heard even in the maze as they're going through that one comment was, my girlfriend and I were thinking about having sex, but we're not anymore. Okay, I think we have run out of time. I'd just like to thank you for watching. You make the difference, and thank you, Frida, for all you've done with Team Maze.
Thank you for having me.
We'll see you next week.
Got a promise from heaven. It's a year of replevin.